It was a typical Friday night at the small-town diner, a place where everyone knew each other's name, where the smell of fresh coffee filled the air, and where the most exciting thing that usually happened was a heated debate over who made the best apple pie. But tonight, something was different. A gang of bikers, 5 men, all decked out in black leather jackets, adorned with patches, rolled into the restaurant. Their motorcycles growled as they parked in front, their presence alone enough to make people pause and glance over their shoulders. They had a reputation. The kind of reputation that made people nervous. The kind of reputation that had them strut into places like they owned them. It wasn't just the leather jackets, the tattoos, or the rough-and-tumble attitude that made them stand out. It was the way they made people feel small without saying a word. Inside, the diners hushed as the bikers swaggered to an empty table, clearly aware of the attention they were getting. One of them, a tall man with a thick beard and a scar running down his face, looked around the room like he was scanning for someone to pick on. And that someone happened to be behind the counter. Sarah, a nurse by profession, was off duty tonight and had come to the diner to relax after a long shift at the local hospital. She had been working in the hospital for years, helping veterans and people from all walks of life, and she had learned a thing or two about handling difficult situations. But she had never encountered anyone quite like this. Sarah sat at the counter, sipping her coffee, when the bikers started making comments. They weren't loud at first, just enough for Sarah to hear under their breath. "Look at her. She's probably one of those soft city nurses, thinking she can fix everything," one of the bikers muttered, loud enough for the entire diner to hear. His companions chuckled as they all stared at Sarah. She didn't react, not at first, but she could feel the shift in the air. She knew how this worked when they started with the quiet comments. It was only a matter of time before it escalated. Sarah had been trained to handle far worse. She had seen injuries, trauma, heartbreak, and grief, but she had never let it change her ability to stay calm. She wasn't about to let a gang of bikers ruin her peaceful evening. As she quietly finished her coffee, one of the bikers, the same man with the scar, stood up and swaggered over to the counter. He looked Sarah up and down before sneering. "What's a nurse like you doing in a place like this? You don't belong here." Sarah set her coffee cup down slowly, keeping her eyes level with his. "I belong wherever I choose to be," she replied, her voice steady but firm. The man chuckled, clearly expecting her to back down. But Sarah wasn't someone who would shrink in the face of intimidation. She had dealt with much worse in her years of service. "You think you're tough, huh?" he said, stepping closer, his breath smelling of cheap beer and cigarettes. "What if we decided to have a little fun with you?" The room went silent. The other patrons, some of whom had been nervously watching the exchange, stiffened. No one dared to speak up except Sarah. "If you want to have fun," she said, her voice quiet but unshakable, "you'll have to take it up with the sheriff, because I don't think the kind of fun you're suggesting is welcome here." The biker's eyes narrowed. He had expected her to cower, to be intimidated by his size and his rough demeanor. Instead, he was met with a calmness that shook him more than any show of fear could. "You think the sheriff will do anything?" he growled. Sarah didn't flinch. "I think you'll regret finding out," she said, still maintaining eye contact. The biker hesitated, his cocky grin faltering. The other bikers, who had been watching with amusement, began to murmur among themselves. They hadn't expected the nurse to fight back, especially not with such calm determination. "What's your name, lady?" the biker asked after a moment, trying to regain control of the situation. "Sarah," she replied, her voice still steady. "And I suggest you leave before you make a bigger mistake than you already have." The biker's face twisted in anger, but there was something else in his eyes: doubt. For the first time, he seemed unsure. His companions looked at each other, unsure of how to respond. Finally, with a grunt of frustration, the biker turned and walked back to his table. Sarah didn't move. She simply picked up her coffee cup again and took a sip, as if the confrontation had never happened. The bikers sat in silence for a while, no longer as loud or intimidating as they had been when they first walked in. Sarah's calm strength had shifted the energy in the room, and the tension that had been hanging in the air slowly dissipated. As the night went on, the bikers finished their meal in silence. They didn't make any more rude comments or try to pick fights. When they finally stood to leave, they did so quietly, heads lowered in a rare show of humility. Sarah, still sitting at the counter, watched them go. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't needed to. She had simply stood her ground, and in doing so, she had earned the respect of everyone in the diner, whether they were aware of it or not. The bikers had picked on the wrong woman, and in the end, it was Sarah's quiet strength and unwavering resolve that had won the day. It was a reminder that sometimes the most powerful response to aggression isn't a fight, but a refusal to back down.